Hey kids, welcome to the third episode of Kyle and Cody Cinema Club. Now, this is going to be our first PG rated review.
Also our first animated movie.
Yeah,
we have not done...
Not too many animated movies on the list, really, but we'll do more.
No.
I don't think... I'm not going to talk about that. First Disney movie, first PG movie. But we're in the similar time area as last time. This movie's made in 1985, and... to remind the guys who weren't here last week, we are reviewing The Black Cauldron, the cult Disney film that almost killed Disney animation.
After making a critical error of $44 million budget, it went around and turned around and only made $25 million back at the box office. 22 million?
No, here's the statistics on that. Budget is between 25 and 44 million.
Yes.
The box office is 21.3 million.
Okay. So it made a decent chunk of it back. It didn't make all of it back, though.
Yeah, but again, like I said last week, they only get half of that money.
Yes.
So they made like 10 million. This movie probably needed to make a conservatively 50 million.
Yeah. And
maybe 80 million. But, yeah, so this movie lost between $4 and $23 million, if I'm doing my math correctly.
But somehow went on to receive its own cult following in the end.
Yeah.
So that was pretty decent.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah, this film, failed financially. I mean, sometimes this money's made up by home release, but that home release didn't come till like 98. So they didn't even have faith enough to put this on VHS very quickly.
It's very indicative of like a very, very fast-paced early Dungeons and Dragons module almost.
We'll get into this more. It lacks a couple traits famous to Disney. There's no songs.
No talking animals either.
Yeah, it's a loose adaptation of a pair of Lloyd Alexander books. His reaction is this bears little resemblance to his books. Mm-hmm. And I did read a synopsis of the two books this is based on, the Book of Three and the Black Cauldron, which are books 2 of 5 of the series he wrote. There's a lot of similar plot points. It's just kind of combined. They take a few elements from Book of Three and put the main plot of Black Cauldron minus one of the characters who's would have been the Aragorn of this series, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. Like he would have been the big badass fighter to supplement the characters who have less physical strength that we see in this.
So I read, actually, in the podcast, Darwin, who plays the main wizard, raised this guy, like this random adopted orphan that he found. I didn't read any of the lore backstories, and he raised it with a warrior named Call. Yeah,
there's a couple characters that are missing in this from the adaptation. The author doesn't. He thinks this is fun on its own. It's not. He doesn't. He says it's a bad adaptation of his books. Mm-hmm. Paraphrasing, but it's no resemblance to the books. But he said it's a fun ride on its own. I kind of disagree. This is gonna be my nice first negative review too.
Oh, change of pace.
Yeah. No, I didn't care for this too much. We'll get into the reasons for that as we go through this. But, so, I watched this on Disney Plus, and when you start a movie on Disney Plus, they have the rating at the top corner of the screen. It said PG for some scary images, which I guess counts, which I think is a big part of why this movie's remembered is because of the scary images, the artwork around like the Horned King especially, and his, I'll call them Draugr, but they're not... If you played Skyrim and you fought the Draugr, you get the idea what the big bad end game is here. But yeah, the art on them is incredible, and I think that's where most of the positive memories of this story come from, because that is gonna give small children nightmares under the right scenarios, and that's gonna really stick in their head. But yeah, we open with the typical fantasy prologue, which... anytime one of these comes on the screen, I just start dreading. Because 95% of the time, especially in a movie, they just repeat this information 20 minutes in or 30 minutes in. And sure enough, they repeat like a good chunk of it. But the strength of a prologue is that you get like some basic lore out there, so you don't have to explain it mid-story. So, and it bugs me. It's not the worst I've seen. You don't have to, the characters in the movie don't repeat every line of this, but like a couple lines. So I let it pass. Really, it's not nearly the worst I've seen. It's not like the one at the beginning of Dragon Ball Evolution where they just like give you the whole thing that Master Roshi has to explain later in the movie, or the one at the beginning of Ready Player One where they're talking about the world while simultaneously showing you the pictures of the world and showing you what it looks like. So we get told that the Horned King is looking for the Black Cauldron, and he's going to use it to resurrect a zombie army.
It's a zombie army or skeleton army. Either one is
what's really the difference?
Well, one has decaying matter flesh, and the other one
Draugr
skin
army,
and
whatever.
Skin and bones.
Yeah.
That's
Some skin on these things.
Yes,
they're pretty creepy. Yeah, like the imagery on this Draugr army is genuinely scary. It's honestly the best parts of the movie. The art. Honestly, yeah, the art in this movie is very good. Which
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. It's not made really bad. There's one flubby bit where they're playing the characters on like a digital background, and that doesn't look very good, but it's only present in one scene, so it's weird.
It's really early Disney, and you can definitely tell. Yeah. It's very...
Well, this is like mid-era Disney, really.
What was the TV? It was the Zelda TV show. It looks very similar to that.
Yeah. It looks very good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially when you're doing the Horned King scenes. So we get the prologue. We're introduced to our main character, Taran, who is a kid who is sick of being in the farm and wants to go off and adventure and becomes a brave knight and a great warrior. And he's a warrior, and he'll tell you that over and over again.
We've never seen that trope before. That is something that's never been done.
Not only has it never been done before, it's been done so many times before, but it's not done well. He doesn't become better.
Also, when we are introduced to this guy, I was listening to the accent on the guy, like the guy who does the main character is so unknown, he doesn't have a Wikipedia page on it, so I don't know how to really compare it. But he sounds, at some points in time, like English, and then Irish, and then like it jumps all over the place, and I don't understand.
American production, American actors, American writer, really. The author of the books is American, too. He's just like really incompetent, and he burns his finger on a pot because he's not paying attention to it. His foster father, what's his name?
Doblin.
Yeah, his foster father Doblin is talking.
I'm pronouncing that right though.
Who cares? Yeah, his foster father Doblin is doing some foreshadowing, talking about how this kid's gonna have to go through something so important, and the kid's given some food, which he takes across to this pig who he's feeding, and the pig's getting hot food, so we know this is a special pig.
Mm-hmm.
This pig's plot relevant, kids.
No farm scraps.
Yeah, he lets the pigs out and proceeds to scare it. We learn this is a special pig that is a prophecy pig. They call it an oracular pig. I'm calling it the prophecy pig.
And in the books, it's actually a white pig.
You can draw the pig to a dish of water, have it dip its head in, stir the water, hypnotize the pig, and it'll show you images of the future. And this is where we get a little bit of the repeating itself from the prologue.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not the worst. They only repeat like a third of it. Yeah, we learn that the Horned King is after the pig because the Horned King can use the pig's powers to locate the Black Cauldron, which he'll use to make his Draugr army. Why? This is it's a silly kid's plot, so I guess.
Mm-hmm. It's Disney.
Yeah. Which it's meant to be fairy tale like. I just don't think this is my gripe with the movie. I don't think it does a good job of doing this fairy tale thing.
No.
Because fairy tales are meant to have a moral. But what's the moral here? I'll get more into this in the end, but the moral's not good.
No.
Especially not for a kids movie, especially not for a Disney movie, and I don't think it teaches kids anything relevant. Nice. We'll get into that. Yeah, we get a bit of the creepy animation where we're first seeing the Horned King, and this plot really needs an Aragorn, because those characters, a lot of fantasy most fantasy usually leans too much into centering on the awesome slashing characters, because it's all D&D campaign like.
Yes.
But this is the opposite end of the spectrum, where it's relying too much on the wimpy Hobbit characters that aren't capable of doing anything on their own. But it's not. You don't get anything endearing out of Taran.
No.
Yeah. And you don't have a tough character to contrast with them like they had in the book Black Cauldron.
If I have to hear about that kid whining that he wants to be a hero for like one more time, I swear to God.
Yeah.
His whole heroism speech is kind of garbage.
And yeah, he gets told by his foster father that he needs to take this kid across country to head to this cabin on the edge of the unknown forest or whatever.
Forbidden Forest.
Of course.
Heard before. Okay, I have something to say about this. In this scene, Doblin the Enchantress, which is the name of the actual character, cuts up a piece of bread and hands this kid an apple. And it's like, okay, now you have to go to the Forbidden Forest and hide out in a cabin until I come and get you. And he gives him, like, not even half a meal, and he didn't have breakfast that morning.
And he doesn't show up for the rest of the movie either. So he never comes to this place.
No.
It's like, maybe it is when we see him at the end of the movie, he's at this other place.
Yes.
And maybe he didn't expect him to not need the food, but why didn't you give him the entire loaf of bread?
Yeah, he cut off a piece of loaf of bread.
Yeah, he cut off a piece of loaf of bread and gave him a chunk of bread and an apple and sent him on his way. But left like a huge bunch of bread in the house, which he may not be able to come back for, judging by the situation. The pig's addressed as a her, which I didn't realize because I thought they were calling it Henry. And they call
Henwin?
it... Yeah. Yeah, they call it... Yeah. I was like, Henwin? Henry? Henwy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that confused me. So the kid starts his journey, finds a lake, starts taking a drink at the lake, starts daydreaming, and immediately loses the pig. Because this kid is useless.
He's a pig keeper.
Yeah, he's an assistant pig keeper.
That gives him every right to lose a few pigs.
Yeah. Then we meet Ewok Jar Jar, a character called Gurgi. Yeah, we meet Gurgi, the Ewok Jar Jar.
Smeagol.
Yeah.
I thought of him as the secret. Have you listened to the guy talk?
No,
he's like my munchies and crunchies and yada yada yada. I'm like, that's totally a Smeagol.
Yes, on the accent, but Smeagol's an interesting character, which is my point here. These are the two worst characters in the book, the story.
Yeah, but he has a redemption arc.
Yeah, it's... I'll give it that. It's a redemption arc. It's not great, but it's there. And he does redeem himself.
Kind of like this movie.
Yeah. And Gurgi proceeds to steal Taran's apple. He then runs off with it. Taran tries getting it back and is waving a stick at this guy. And I'm like, hit him. Hit him and get your apple back. This is clearly not...
That is like one of your two provisions that was granted to you.
Yeah.
And you just gave it away.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't think you're going to make it to the Forbidden Forest. This guy does not seem competent enough to scavenge his own food.
I don't know what the etiquette is for dealing with monkeys. I don't know what the etiquette is for dealing with monkeys who stealing your food.
It's never explained to it. Even in the book, because I read the synopsis on the book, they called him a man beast. So yeah. I to this moment, I still do not know.
I read that too, and he's like short, which is the thing. And the character in the book is, I get the impression he's a bit older than this, or looks a bit older. But yeah, the kids in this movie, I don't think they're they're on the younger side, early teens, I think.
Yes. 13 maybe? 14?
Yeah. Certainly not too much older than that.
No.
Yeah, you deserve... And then he gets caught, and he's like, oh, yeah, I deserve to get hit. And I'm like, yes, you do. You deserve to be hit. And it's like, idiot. And then then the wyverns show up, and they steal the pig. Because they found him and picked him up. And I guess, I don't know how the Horde King knows where the pig is, but doesn't know where the Black Cauldron is. Like, how do you figure out about the pig?
Well, from my understanding is the Black Cauldron, spoiler alert, and we'll get into this later. The Black Cauldron isn't within the realm, is it not? It's in with one of the fairy, realm.
Yeah, it is sort of summoned from the earth later on.
Yes.
I think it is something... Yeah, I guess the impression is that it's something...
magical.
You get gifted.
Yes.
Like, there's someone who's in control of it, and they can give it to you. Mm-hmm. Because in my reading of the synopsis of the book, it explains that the Horned King had got it from the witch characters, which we meet a little bit later, and the only reason he still doesn't have the Black Cauldron is that he kept it longer than he was supposed to, based on their deal with him, which is interesting.
Operation Repoed it.
Yeah, and I actually like that as a explanation. It's not explained in this, I don't think, but it is. I think that's a neat little thing, and I don't think it's necessarily needed to be mentioned in the adaptation. Because we never really get the Horned King has a vague backstory in this.
Well, that's what happens when you decide to make a book on or a movie on book 3 of a series. There's going to be gaps in.
I'm not going to give it too much shit over this because a lot of this stuff is easily left out.
Oh yeah,
because you didn't need to get the whole backstory about how Sauron had tricked the kings to get the rings made.
And I mean, I guess when your audience is generally I don't know, the 8, 9, 10-year-olds, generally you could just call it in. Right?
Yeah, this is a children's story too, so it doesn't need too much. Yeah, this really leans into the idea you get with how some people talk about The Hobbit, where it's a children's story, and you read them a little bit toward bed. At this point, after Taran had failed to get the pig before the wyverns, he had wandered up to a hilltop and sees them fly toward the Horned King's castle, where he swears he needs to go in there. Gurgi's telling him that, oh yeah, you can't go in there, you're going to be hurt.
I would like to just take a pause there and talk about locale. Because when Gandalf came to Frodo and was like, hey, here's this ring, we need you to take it all the ways to that mountain, all the ways over there, it was going to be a long journey. This seems to be like a trip down to the supermarket every single time. He goes in and he's like, oh, I stumbled upon a castle, which happens to be where I needed to go for
Yeah, this seems like a smaller scale story. Maybe it's taking place within a county.
Yes.
Essentially, I don't necessarily mind that, because this is something a kid could, the kid could do a similar walk like this if he wanted to. I think the entire area is maybe the size of a county, like I was saying. So I don't think it's a particularly large area.
No.
Which maybe it's just spies and figuring out stuff, but it doesn't seem like it's a large scale. So yeah, Gurgi says you shouldn't go in there. And Taran's like, oh, I need to go in there to save everything, because I'm not scared of the Horned King. Mm-hmm. He is going to be, which is the point of the story. But we'll get into this. Yeah, Gurgi then talks about oh no, now Gurgi's friend is gone. And it's like, you weren't friends. And this is the first major thing where I'm like, okay, you need to change this. I think Gurgi should have been the reason he lost. Because then, imagine this. Taran's walking around, and then Gurgi, who's in this situation, kind of like a trickster spirit, sort of archetype, he talks to him, and he's like, oh yeah, let's play a game. And it's like, oh yeah, we can play a game, because that's a short trip.
Yeah.
And Then that causes him to lose the pig, and Gurgi refuses to go in because and then this works better because Gurgi's the cause of the thing, and they were friends. So like his sacrifice, that's a spoiler. Yeah, that makes Gurgi's eventual character arc mean a lot more later on in the story. But it's just like, okay, you weren't friends. You didn't like each other.
He threatened to hit you with a stick. What type of Stockholm syndrome is this?
Yeah. It's like, make friends with him because he's a silly character. He can be likable to a small kid, which is this audience. But it's like, okay, now you're just this nuisance. So Taran goes to the castle, starts climbing up, climbs in through a hole he makes in the wall.
Which I don't know if he started to climb and was like, I can make a hole in this wall. Or he could see the hole in the wall with the light shining through from down underneath the ridge and was like, I'm going to poke a hole in this wall and see if it caves in and then proceed to walk in there. But either way, like...
That is a bold path of going through this. I suppose he needs to climb up the wall either way.
Yeah, maybe I'm giving this kid a little too much credit than what he deserves because he doesn't seem to be the brightest throughout the movie.
And here we see the bandit characters who are silly B-level thugs.
All of them are crudely drawn, full-grown men who are drunk or drinking some form of concoction, probably wine. It looks purple. There's a lady dancing on a table. There was goblins. I like the goblins because goblins, dogs, and you can see in the corner there's they look like dragons. And
I've been calling them the wyverns.
They are wyverns, but they have their own name within the universe. And then I think at one time I thought I heard somebody call him a griffin, if I'm not mistaken. So we've got like 3 explanations on what these creatures are. But for all intents and purposes, they are dragons. They breathe fire. They have scaly.
Do they breathe fire?
Maybe they don't breathe fire.
I don't think they breathe fire.
They're reptile with wings. Yeah. Like they should be able to breathe fire by medieval fantasy definitions.
Yeah, they're partying in the They're partying in the drinking room. The kids wandered past a guard at this point. The kids wandered past a guard at this point. He wanders onto a crossbeam and starts seeing the wyverns dump the pig in the room.
Yes,
which is a big deal, and they start trying to interrogate the pig and get it to do its thing. They don't really know how to do it, so they're like, okay, we're gonna make you talk, make you do your thing, and they bring out a hot iron, and the kid's just like, no, and then falls, and then he's captured, and he's like, listen kid, you're gonna make the pig talk, and he's like, oh, I don't know how to do it, which was the right decision. I'm not gonna hold that against this because this would probably happen even in the good version of this movie. But the kid does relent when they attempt to try to kill the pig, which until 12 hours ago, this was just like a meat pig.
See, so once again, this movie has 0 consequences. If they would have killed the pig right then and there, how is that a bad thing?
Yeah, that does kind of prevent the Horned King from finding the cauldron.
The Horned King can't find the cauldron, and I guess he's searching through all magical devices that he can find, because that comes into play a little later in the series. It's mentioned that he's going around trying to find people who have magical abilities and stuff that can use some form of
letting the pig die would delay him, if nothing else, which is good, and maybe eventually an army comes on and does this.
Yes.
Someone who's qualified. And the boy starts cowering, and he's like, I'm like, oh no, the kid is actually afraid? I never would have guessed. The story arc here wasn't painfully obvious from the beginning.
Well, in all fairness, I talk a lot of shit about this kid not being a hero, but he very dumbly charged headfirst into a castle of thugs, zombies, somebody named the Horned King, dragons, not armed at all.
I think there is a certain amount of bravery he is capable of, but he's just not quite there, and he's much too arrogant for you to forgive these in the normal part. Like, he's not quite he's not an everyman. It's like, oh, I'm an everyman, but I'm pulling out my bootstraps because this is the right thing to do, and I'm still realistically going to get scared because I'm still a human being. Mm-hmm. But he's just really twerpy kid that you don't like, and is just talking big, and like you get satisfied when he fails. And you're like, every time he starts succeeding again, starts getting arrogant again, you're like, ugh, this again. But every time he fails, you're cheering for it because you don't like him. Yeah. He needs to be more of an everyman character that you can get behind, but he's not. You just want him to be put back into his place. At the last minute, Taryn flips the plate over, and then the water burns the Horned King. Why?
I don't have an explanation.
Is this holy water? Was he keeping this open holy water around for a while?
Well, I mean, arguably it wasn't necessarily water. It was purple water with
this does look different from the water that we saw the enchanter use earlier in the movie. Mm-hmm. It did look red or whatever.
Purple.
Yeah, it did look purple. So, yeah, the kid then gets the pig and starts running away. He gets the pig, runs away with it, and manages to throw the pig into the, I guess, moat lake. Yeah. I'd say moat, but it's in this castle's built in the middle of a lake, which is good defensible position.
Which brings me back to this fight scene here for a second. This kid has the weird, uncanny ability of like plot armor. Yeah. That's his whole defense at this point in time. And I mean, it's meant for kids, so they can't just go around killing small children within a children's movie.
And I don't think they intended this. I don't think they really wanted it to be PG rated. Mm-hmm. I think it's just PG because of the scary images. Yeah. But they're intent on actually producing a G-rated movie here. Yeah. This is before Disney was comfortable with making things purposely PG because PG movies go over a bit better in the box office than G-rated movies.
Okay.
Yeah. You get a little bit of an advantage when the parents get the idea that they're not going to be completely miserable sitting through it, and it's not necessarily true that a G-rated movie is not going to be as bad, but it's better off because then you're getting the parents to buy the ticket more likely. And I don't think this is operating under that principle. I think it's just coincidentally rated PG, and that's a situation Disney isn't like opposed to. Because a light PG, I don't think is going to bother them. They are a family company, but a light PG.
Yes,
kids can still watch it. Normally there's a parent around too. So the kid throws the pig into the lake, which saves the pig. The pig survives the fall, thankfully. Though falling isn't really a thing in movies. No. When was the last time you heard someone die when it fell?
There was water underneath, but I don't know if you checked that lake for rocks, piranhas, anything. It's a moat to a castle. Yeah. Like alligators, maybe.
I mean, just having the moat is enough defensibility. It keeps like guys walking right up to your walls and putting a siege engine right up to them.
Yes.
Yeah. So you don't necessarily need the alligators.
Also, when they drew the castle, and we saw the castle for the first time, you could see that they had one spiny path creeping its way up through the moat, over the moat. Yeah. Up to the castle. That's like literally this. I guess
which isn't a bad thing unless you want things coming out of the castle. So, yeah, the pig gets away, but the kid gets captured. And like a typical Gary Stu, he just walks right into a love interest. We get the princess appears when she pushes a rock out of the way and just crawls through the floor, which she's the best character in the movie for a large chunk of it, not counting like the Horned King, but of the heroes. You like the bard better?
No.
Yeah,
they're just all very bad.
Yeah, and there's parts where she's bad too. It's not. Yes. But I like her. She was my favorite character for this part of the movie, at least. Mm-hmm. She has a little glowing ball that follows her around. And the Horn King had figured that this would help
so
him do stuff and find the cauldron somehow. It wasn't well thought out, but that's
why she was captured and why she was in the dungeon next to him. But I'd like to point out that that floating ball is only there for like the first 10 minutes of this movie, like this scene, and then vanishes completely off the earth for the rest of the movie.
It does show back up.
Yes.
But only when they explicitly need it. Yeah, I did notice that when there's scenes where this thing is gone completely.
Mm-hmm.
Like long scenes where it's just not on screen.
I mean, I guess they might have tried to justify it earlier, like in the dungeon and there's rats around and it's chasing these rats. So maybe it's just off chasing rats for half the movie, but like...
Or maybe there's...
They're like, it loves chasing those rats all around all the time. Like,
maybe there's a bit more budgetary issues with this movie than we realized.
Yes.
Maybe that explains the digital background from when Taryn and Gurgi were standing on that hilltop earlier, which looked really bad because you can like see the white outline around the characters. But yeah, maybe there were more budgetary concerns on this initially than we thought.
So Disney, I'd like to point out and give you my own free advice here. If you can keep this, by the way, completely free of charge. If you're going to go in and have budgetary issues on a movie, why animate somebody cutting a piece of bread off to hand to this kid instead of just being like, here, have this loaf of bread and a single apple and go on your adventure.
We also noticed something here that I took note of. They're hauling the bodies here to become druggers, which I guess makes sense. I guess they're just not all here, so they're just hauling them here.
Yes.
So they can get hit by the cauldron later. Which gives you the hint that he did have this before at some point. Which is a nice little thing. He knows how it works.
So, from my understanding, it's a little bit of necromancy?
Yeah. Yeah, it's necromancy.
Okay. But is it specific necromancy? Is he trying to summon up the army that he once had? Is he just making zombies out of dead people that have already been dead? Is he, like... What is your definition of what his army consists of? Because there's never... Every single person who comes back to life in the scene that they were shown coming back to life were all armored and pre-armed.
Yeah, they clearly picked these things up from battlefields.
Yeah.
But that hadn't been picked clean, which is a little odd, I think. But I don't know. The princess guides him through the castle and finds him guides him through a tomb, which is in the basement of this castle for some reason. And it's not picked clean, clearly, because Taryn finds a magic sword.
Well, okay, when he first described the sword, he looked at it and it was in a sheath and he's like, oh, it's a sword. And then he wipes a layer of dust off of it. And as soon as I saw that layer of dust come off of it, I was like, oh, this is going to be a magical sword, isn't it? Like, why? Because it's glowing and it's not rusted at all. It's been perfectly preserved down in this tomb for... They
just give this level 1 commoner a powerful magic item.
Okay. So, once again, this brings me back to the whole, oh, this kid's got the power of plot armor. This kid... literally given a sword that is literally the definition of plot armor.
I think all of this should happen before they rescued the pig. Because hear me out here. He should have maybe gone to the castle, been kept... I think he maybe gets rescued by the princess at some point. Mm-hmm. And then she guides him through the castle because he needs to find the pig. Yeah. And he finds the sword, and he... uses the sword to try to take on the Horn King. It's like, oh yeah, magic sword, I can be a warrior. And then he needs to fail miserably. Because this is the arc of the story, is that he needs to realize that, oh yeah, you're not a hero, you need to...
Well, okay, not necessarily not a hero, not a warrior.
Yeah, you're not a warrior, so you need to...
Maybe try a rogue or
paladin. Yeah, so you need to... And it's trying to make him accept that. And I think he needs to be brought low, and brought low on a permanent basis. Mm-hmm. Not where, like, he starts learning this lesson and then immediately gets it shot off so that he doesn't need to recover.
I see what you're coming from, and I definitely think that's a good idea. Or he needs a mentor.
Yeah.
Like Obi-Wan to Luke Skywalker, where they can be like, strike me down and I will come back powerfuler, and then...
Or even, like I said, Aragorn.
Yeah, well...
Aragorn, where he's... Yeah, Aragorn, where he's just like a big badass that he can look up to for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he just...
Then they could have killed him off, and then it'd be a whole thing.
A lot of the issue here is that they just don't have that amazing supporting cast to deal with shittier Bilbo here. Because Bilbo is not as... Because we like Bilbo. Bilbo gets his moments. But, yeah, Bilbo gets his moments, but he has other characters to make up for the moments when he is shitty and just a coward, and he gets... If he's being annoying, at least we got these other characters we can follow that we like. Mm-hmm. But here, he's just like such a center of attention, and the other characters just don't quite make up for it.
No.
So after this, we meet the Bard, who's also a character I don't mind. He has a Pinocchio lyre, which loses a string every time he starts lying, which is fun. It's...
No, also, his name's stupid. It's like flute... fuck.
So is the princess. She's like Princess Aloe.
Flute or Flam.
Flute or Flam, spelt Flewddur. Fflam. Which is Old Englishy. So yeah, he's recovered. They free him. They lose track of him for a little bit, so he doesn't actually participate in their escape. He just kind of tags along with that. Because they managed to escape the castle on their own, by which I mean the sword does all the work. It just springs into things. There's a little bit of ingenuity where he springs open some wine barrels and uses it to trip some guys, but the sword also just like coincidentally hits things and cuts through them.
Well, no, you're definitely wrong. That the sword is actually what caused him to start stabbing at the wine barrels. That wasn't him at all. Once again,
I believe you.
This character is like protected by the most easy plot armor ever, and that's a magical sword that can see things in the room and act accordingly to every situation that it needs to, right?
I didn't notice that, but I believe you because there are several moments where this sword just pulls him in a direction and he cuts a thing. Yeah. This sword's doing all the work, and he proceeds after this to act like he's this big badass, which he's not. He's lying to us, and which is adding to my thing earlier where he should have gotten it first. Because then he gets brought low by the old Horn King. Maybe that's more action there than they're wanting to do. But
more
still,
budget.
Yeah, more budget. But still, there's... Yeah, the Disney movies in this era don't have tons of action, I don't think.
No.
Yeah, he drops the sword. He... Initially, when he's walking through, he drops the sword at one point. And drops it again. And it's magic. Yeah, he drops it several times when it's on his own power. And once he gets it out, it's like, oh yeah, now it's magic and it's just going to do all the work. And it's like, shut up, kid. You're not... He's so proud of himself. And there's a part later where it literally just jumps out of his hands and does the fight on its own. He's not even holding it.
Also, magical swords, and apparently for the longest time, magical scarab's the correct word, right?
For
like,
what?
When you put scabbard, there we go. Yeah. Magical scabbard, because he loses this thing constantly, and then all of a sudden it'll cut to a showing of his full body, or at least enough. Also, he's carrying this thing in two hands for the longest time. Yeah. And this irks me because it has like a perfect backstrap, and he's never like, I'm going to put this on my back. I'm just going to carry it like this.
Yeah. Though if you're carrying it on its back, it's hard to draw.
Is it?
Yeah. No, that's drawing a sword from your back is fantasy make-believe for the most part.
Yeah.
You can make special things, but they look really weird. But it's hard to draw a sword from your back. It takes forever.
Well, what about your side? Or
from the hip.
And anything
you typically draw it from the hip. They've done. You can watch videos on this, and people. And people have in the modern day made custom scabbards where it has like a wing at the top of it and just flies out from there.
Okay.
So yeah, they get cornered by a bunch of men. The sword drives him to cut through the chain because he doesn't know what to do. The sword needs to do all the work.
Yes.
And yeah, they cut the chain, the drawbridge falls, and the bard just barely joins the party. He running away from a dog who rips his pants. So they get out of here, and then they gather themselves away from the castle. Princess Alonwe starts showing the bard's pants, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, I wasn't scared." Bullshit. And then he's just like, "Wait, you?" And the princess's wife are like, "Oh, you were scared. You're not very
Give
good
him
at
an
this."
out too, and he's like got into this giant fight with her about it. Like,
and he's like, "Oh yeah, what does a girl know about this?" I'm like, dude, we don't like you. Don't make this worse. Like, don't add like petty misogyny to this.
yeah.
You're not in. This is like, I'm anti-shipping these characters because I don't want them to get together. She's too good for him.
And also, I'd like to point out to Disney, this chick in the books probably, like, this girl in the books was probably a lot cooler. But in your version, you've had her play the damsel, not necessarily in distress. She's clearly magical of some sorts.
Here's the thing. She
and
stops
you've got
doing
her
anything.
to sew pants.
Yeah, here's the thing that pisses me off. She stops doing anything useful after this point. She helps in the castle. And this is the problem with this. All these useful side characters that could be like, okay, we need to work together, and together we can be a competent team. They only do what they're only useful for like a short period of time. The princess was useful in the castle, and the bard will be useful a little bit later when they meet the witches. Yes. But other than that, they don't do anything. And yeah, we need to be put onto this.
Better, more competent side characters.
Yeah, a better, more competent protagonist. The bard then proceeds to meet the Jar Jar Ewok. Yeah, Gurgi attacks the bard. Princess likes Gurgi, which is my first real point against her. Gurgi then finds the pig. The princess trusts Gurgi. Kyle is disappointed in the princess.
Yes.
Gurgi starts guiding them toward the pig because he saw it go into a puddle. And it starts reaching into this whirlpool puddle. And I'm like, yes, kill Gurgi. And then Gurgi falls in. And Terran goes rescuing him. I'm like, yes, kill Terran. And then the bard and the princess try rescuing Terran. I'm like, no, not the rest of them. And then they all fall down. And then they're all unconscious. And we get introduced to the fairy characters. And the the baby fairies are cute. They have like little baby voices, and it's very nice. It's like, it's the nice kind of child voice acting, where it's not like, ow, this hurts my ears. This is like, oh, I'm nice little baby, and I'm very nice, and we're very sweet. And we see two of the older fairies, including Dottie, who is the fifth member of the party, but not really. I think he does more in the books, but temporary side character that we borrow.
Side character that we borrow that does nothing to the storyline either.
Yeah, he guides them to the witches. That's
okay,
it.
Yeah,
that's about it. So we see Dottie and the Fairy King working on this series of ease troughs, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it collapses. It's very shoddy workmanship. The fairies have the pig, and then Dottie proceeds to recover.
The pig is, once again, dripped in Pollard armor like we need. Yeah. I feel like they have to drive a point, and they're like, well, we got to get the pig back. Where's the pig? The pig is at the place that they need to go to find the cauldron. The cauldron's...
So yeah, they recover the pig. The fairies know where the Black Cauldron is. Yeah. So Terran gets in his head that he wants to destroy the cauldron, which, no, just fuck off. If we were going with my version of this, he'd be trying to give up right now and just go into the thing. And
maybe the Fairy King has some wise words of wisdom and gets him back into the fray.
There needs to be something here, but he's too up his own ass at this moment.
Once again, I feel like fantasy is something that I could write if I really put my mind to it, and this just doesn't really...
There's nothing for this here. It's just like there's nothing...
It's for children.
Yeah, it's for children, and there's nothing really...
Not even like... This is for 1985 children, not to knock on the 1985 children out there, But, like, this one we had, like, in 2004 or 5, we have, like, Lords of the Rings to contend with. We have Harry Potter to contend with, and we're not going to get it started in there because, like, we have so much more fantasy tropes and stuff like that aren't being included in here, and it definitely needed to be.
This leaves out a lot of what would have, in theory, made the books good, which I totally believe it's not as good as the books. I haven't had the chance to read them. No. But, so Dottie guides them to the swamp and... The marsh. Dottie guides them to the marsh, but we know from earlier that the king is tracking them because he was trying to track them to the pig. And they leave the pig behind at this point. So... No. What?
They tell the pig to go back, or no, the fairies take the pig back to...
Oh, yeah. So the fairies do his original quest for him.
Which, okay, so to me, the thing that bugs me here is that they're like, oh, we need to hide this pig in the Forbidden Forest, and then they send him back straight to Doblin, who Doblin was the person who sent the pig out in the first place. Like, they're playing weird hot potato with this pig.
It's possible they sent him to the Forbidden Forest. We don't see too much of that. But yeah, the pig's out of the movie at this point, either way. This is where I first noticed that the princess orb was gone, because it's gone for this entire section. To symbolize the fact that she is no longer useful to the story, because this is just side characters we pick up for one mission. Yeah, the orb is gone. Now the men can do all the work. Now that she doesn't have any...
magical capabilities?
Yeah. Yeah, like she has... this magic ball that they never use. It's like, okay, maybe this is guiding her? It's like, but no, they don't explain it. They don't use it. Because the orb could never have been, because easily have never been there. And she's just like, oh yeah, I have to, I'm a
princess.
Yeah, there's
she could have just been a princess, and then they give her magic abilities, and then she never uses magic abilities. She might as well just have been a princess.
I guess the implication is the orb's guiding her around, but even then, it's like, whatever. Oh yeah, the ball back briefly to show them out of the underground where they had met the fairies.
Yes.
They now meet the witches, one of which is very taken with the bard, classic bard.
Yeah, but like this bard's like he wasn't even a young, attractive bard. This guy looks like he was drawn in his like mid-50s with pointed ears. By the way, that was something that was never brought up, but like his ears look really pointed. And whenever I think of pointed ears in fantasy, it's always elven. And
this is weird because there's like stuff you could set up for a sequel. Because again, this only covers like the stuff that happens in the first 2 of 5 books. There could have been another couple books of this.
Yes.
But and Disney doesn't really do too many sequels at this point.
No.
I think we're even early for like the straight to VHS sequels that we get later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's weird that they do it like this. Though I get that the witch and the bard seem similar age-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like age-appropriate flirting.
But, I mean, one's a witch and the other's, like, maybe a half-elf.
I mean, look, when has a difference in speciation ever stopped the bard?
Okay.
We've played enough D&D.
I will give you that much. Yeah, but the bard also looked like he was not having it at all.
Yeah, no, he wasn't into it. No. He was just like... his charisma was his downfall here.
I feel like
they try turning the bard into a frog so they can eat him, but the witch that likes him keeps turning him back. Mm-hmm. He eventually ends up in the witch's cleavage for whatever reason, which is a weird thing that they can do in kids shows.
Yeah,
because I've seen them do this in like... This is actually fairly early 2000s in the Justice League cartoon. Wonder Woman has to get Adam to a place, and Adam just shrinks down and she drops him in her cleavage. And I was like, is this allowed in kids' movies?
They could have put her in the tiara. They could have put her anywhere.
Hang from the hair.
Yeah.
It's just a weird thing that we're allowed to do in kids' movies, I guess.
Get away with it, I guess.
Yeah. You'd think there'd be a rule, but there's not.
I also liked when they were doing the frog scene. They had him frog, human, frog, human. And then at one point it was like, human, but with a frog's mind, and he shoots his tongue out and eats
his brain doesn't turn back all the way for a little bit, so
Yes.
he shoots his tongue out and gets a fly. So they start making a deal where the witches are just like, oh yeah, they talk amongst themselves like, yeah, we'll give you the Black Cauldron, but we want the sword. And under their reasoning is just like, oh yeah, we'll give them the sword, and then they'll realize that, like, oh yeah, they can't actually use the Black Cauldron, foreshadowing, and then we'll end up with both, because they won't have any use for it, and they'll just leave it behind. So Taran initially doesn't want to get rid of the sword, but he doesn't want to get rid of the sword, but initially he has to do it, and he trades the sword, and they get it, and the cauldron is summoned from the earth, which is cool. I like this, actually. Yeah. The animation in this is great a lot of the time, which is, I think, reasoning for a lot of the cult status, because there's a lot of... The animation is great, and yeah, they summon to the thing, and the witches tell them, oh yeah, you can't destroy it, at least within the context of this fantasy setting. I imagine if you had dynamite, you'd disagree with that a little bit. It's just like conventionally indestructible for the fantasy setting, or possibly, who knows. But they're just like, the only thing you can do is you can disable the magic by willingly jumping into the cauldron, and that'll almost make a Christ-like sacrifice, and that'll stop the cauldron from being able to do magic. The princess and Taran are having a moment, and they're like, oh yeah, you should... It looks like... And the bard and Gorgie are observing this, and they're like, the bard's just like, I think love's in the air, and Gorgie kisses him, which is funny. Yeah. So the wyverns show up. Gurgi runs off. We get another image of the terrifying Horned King. So the main cast gets captured. They are now tied up directly above the Black Cauldron, where he sets it up in the castle so he can start resurrecting the Draugr. So this is a bad plan, because the second they get freed or they get themselves loose, they're going to start causing problems, at least temporarily.
Also, I'd like to make kind of a change there. Everybody gets captured except for Gordon.
Yeah, they're tied up. Torin agrees to jump in because he's supposed to have a character arc, I guess, because he's thinking he's useless right now or something. But then Gorgie's just like, no, you have friends. I don't really have friends, so I'm going to jump in. Which would have been great for his character arc, but he was just a jerk before this, and they weren't really friends, which is... They didn't get along, really. Which
he just kind of showed up.
Yeah, he just kind of showed up. He was a dick, and they didn't really get along.
And he just kind of just forced himself onto this group and just started following them.
Yeah, he didn't do much. He could have been gone.
He was gone for half the movie.
He could have been gone for the rest of the movie. So... Yeah, the Draugr army is then stopped. It's been going for a little bit at this point. They realize something's wrong. The Horned King and his goblin goon head back to the cauldron, because clearly something's been weird. Maybe it needs to be refueled or something. Turned on and off again. You know how this works. Classic IT solutions. So the movie's basically done at this point. The problem's been solved.
Yes.
Especially, we see the Horned King. Taran's gone toward the cauldron because he's hoping to maybe we can save him. Maybe we can save him. Yeah, maybe we can save him. And then he starts wandering things. The cauldron starts sucking things in. The Horned King pretends to be threatening for a little bit. He has red eyes with dots in the middle of them right at this point in the movie, which makes him a lot less scary. So, yeah, it starts sucking things in. This is normally where you'd have some sort of fight scene where maybe Taran would shove the Horned King and then he'd get sucked into the cauldron. No, Horned King really just gets sucked in on his own.
And also, the Wikipedia synopsis here that I have open it says the cauldron's magic is out of control and it consumes the Horned King in a tunnel of fire and blood. which I'm assuming they weren't allowed to put fire and blood in this. So it was just like green smoke that was sucking.
Yeah. And yeah, it gets the Horned King, one of the wyverns. The castle then proceeds to implode upon itself. Our heroes barely escape. So of course they did. The castle didn't really need to explode.
No.
We see the goblin fly off with the other wyvern.
Mm-hmm.
For, I guess, a sequel, which they never made, because this movie made no money.
No.
And was... This movie did... Movies with box office turnouts like this kills studios all the time. If it wasn't Disney, there's a real chance that this just dies here. And it even doesn't hit Disney. This is probably leading us toward the era where we get the Disney Renaissance.
Early 90s.
Yeah, the early 90s. This is before we get Little Mermaid, Lion King, Aladdin.
Oh, yeah.
Big so this is before that, and this is a little bit of an experimentation phase, I guess, which Disney gets up to after they've been successful for a little bit. But yeah, it just didn't. This would really bring them back to form after this failed. After this, you get full-on musicals again. You get... I guess Michael Eisner or whoever telling them to go back to their roots and start making more movies like Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, I think is before this. So yeah, the cauldron emerges from the water and the witches come to reclaim the cauldron. Yeah. Because, hey, this was their plan. They were going to realize it was useless. And I was like, hey, we can have it back. But then the bard's just like, no. Like you say, you don't give away anything for free. We want to bargain. Which, this is actually a pretty decent scene.
So I'm going to talk about this cauldron for a second here because it's never stated. Its magic's off.
Yeah.
Right now. Does it recharge? Does it come back in like 100 years? Is it re-magical again then?
Yeah.
What do the witches want?
Does it make stew very flavorful?
Yeah, like that's... like.
Does it give it that extra spice of evil?
Well, kids, so they were hoarding other black cauldrons, as we seen in the Witch's Lair scene earlier.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have any explanation on why she has, or they have, all these cauldrons, or maybe just because they're witches. Like, what is the purpose of the cauldron now that it's no longer magical?
Yeah. Anyway, the witch that's hot on the bard just like, okay, fine, we'll give you back what you paid for it, and he gives him back the sword, and he's just like, I don't deserve this, I'm not a hero, so he gives back the sword, and he's like, you know what I want? I want Gurgi back. And he's like, wait, no, we can't do that, and then the bard's just like, oh yeah, so you're liars then, you have no real power, which is bullshit, because earlier in the movie, they sucked up their witch's lair in a big tornado and left only behind this cauldron. And as they're speaking, appearing in a giant cloud.
Also, he saw firsthand the witch's power. He was turned into a frog very temporarily. Like, why are you just, like, spitting in the face of these obviously magical creatures?
So, yeah, he's just calling them out, which... I get the sentiment, but it's just done.
He's trying to goading them into.
Yeah, he successfully goads them, and they manage to resurrect Gurgi. Oh joy!
That was the worst trade deal in the history of trade deals.
I don't mind this. I don't mind it, but it's the rest. It's just it'd be cruel of me to say, oh yeah, Gurgi didn't deserve to live.
No, but if you've got the chance to trade for Gurgi. Or a magical plot armor sword that knows every situation. Which one would you take?
So, yeah, let's get to the theme here now.
Okay.
Because this is the time to talk about this. The theme, the realization that Taran gets in the book, based on the Wikipedia article, is that he realizes that, oh yeah, I don't really care for this heroic stuff. It's way too much trouble.
Power of friendship, though.
Yeah. It's way too much trouble, so he goes home with Gurgi and the princess. But here, it's just like, it's not really demonstrated. He just like he's never convincingly beaten down long enough that there's never a moment where he's just like, oh yeah, I'm way in over my head. And like he never really settles into his role, which he doesn't really have a role that's good to settle in.
No.
He's just, the moral here is kind of, you're shit and you'll always be shit. Which is a bad message for a kid's movie, I think.
Yes.
And like a bad message for a kid's movie, a bad message for a Disney movie. It's one thing where he's just like, okay, I didn't want to be what I thought I wanted to be, so now I'm going to be something else. It's, oh yeah, you're a loser and you're going to continue to be a loser because that's what you're always destined to be. And it doesn't teach kids anything good, which is why I don't give this thing slack as a kid's film. Because it's not like I disagree with stuff that's kids' movie. I watch Power Rangers and enjoy like 50 to 60% of it. But stuff like Power Rangers, you're teaching kids something. Like teaching them some positive message, like bravery or environmental awareness or whatever. But they just don't... This kid... Terran doesn't learn anything except, oh yeah, you were in always over your head and you're not anything special.
So what I'm going to add to that is I watched the Hobbit film and I'm going to revamp and go back to that a lot because it's a good movie and it's a good book and it's, you know, Bilbo Baggins has kind of the same journey where he's thrust upon into this situation where he's like, we're going to go to a far off land, we're going to reclaim a kingdom, and then he goes back home at the end of the novels and then at the end of the movie and he's going back to his place back in
and the thing was,
where the fuck is
the Shire?
The Shire. He goes back to the Shire and he's rich after that. Like he made money on that and he was rich beforehand.
Here's the thing, Bilbo's sin was sloth. His problem was he was sitting on his ass doing nothing, and he needed to be gotten off his ass so he could reach his true potential.
Yeah, but this kid's going back to being a fucking pig keeper.
Here's the problem. Terran's sin isn't sloth, it's hubris or an arrogance. Yeah. He thinks he's shit and he needs to be put down, and he needs to change his ways into something that's more up his alley. He needs to like be a good farmer or something. There's a nice little.
But he's not, because now he's married to a princess and he's going to be a king. Yeah,
and this reminds me,
is he going to be a good king? Probably
he could have been
not.
a farmer. He could have been a farmer. It's like there's a nice scene in The Name of the King where he talks about where the king tells the secret to the main characters, like, hey, a farmer can be a good king because like 90% of nation running is a lot of running your agricultural sector, especially in the Middle Ages. Yeah. It's about making sure all your farmers know what to do is important. And it's like, that's what I think you get in the books is like after he comes home, he gets to learn that he gets to reach his true potential as a farmer, and that's what brings him to prominence later on. It just fails as a kid's movie, and I don't give it. What do you give it, Cody?
I really don't know. So here's the thing: towards the end, it got confusing. It got campy. I stopped watching it. I finished the movie, but I stopped really paying attention to it. It just kind of got that level of, you know, I don't know. I'd say, 4 out of 10. It's not. I don't understand why there's a cult following of this even.
Yeah. Like, I give it 2.
2.
Yeah.
That is.
My thing is like I said last week, where it's. Okay, this is where I said last week, this is the almost perfect version of this movie. I'm like, this is almost the worst form of this movie. It's got like some great animation and the villain's threatening, but he doesn't do anything.
Also, he was the only person worth mentioning in the cast because he was voiced by John Hurt. Everybody else was no-named. Much.
It hasn't had much of a career.
No. Or are really old.
Yeah. Like, the bad guy's scary in this, but he doesn't do enough. He's not, his powers, like, it's like Palpatine, but he never shoots lightning out of his hands.
Does he really even? Yeah, he kind of chokes a gremlin every once in a while. And that's about it.
There's no thing in defeating him. He's just kind of decrepit. But yeah, I'm giving it 2 out of 10 because it fails as a kids movie. It doesn't do the things you need a kids movie to do. Mm-hmm. Which it's for kids isn't okay. This is bad, but for kids implies that you need to do something preferably educational, and this doesn't. And the character arcs just aren't done properly.
I'm gonna say this for it. I don't think there's going to be a kid who's going to be as critical of this film as 2 adults are going to be.
Yeah,
and that's kind of the issue, though. Like, a kid's going to sit down, they're going to go, oh, that was an okay movie. Let's watch it again. Or they're going to be like, okay, that was an okay movie. I'm done with this forever now.
Except they can't watch it again because this didn't come out on tape till 1998.
Unless they went multiple theater trips. And they clearly did not.
Yeah, this failed a lot. There was some real soul searching in Disney animation after this, and we do get some really good movies after that. Because the most comparable thing in the Disney filmography to this is probably Atlantis, but Atlantis is way better than this.
Yes,
Atlantis is really good, and I will defend that movie because that, like this, is a sort of high. It's more science fiction-y, but it's like a high genre film with no songs.
Yes.
But that film has character development and everything's turns out okay in that, and this doesn't. So yeah, that's my first negative review.
This is the one point in time that I've actually think I've been lower. I've given a film a higher rating than you have.
Which is good. We need to establish this, that we're not predictable. Because I like fantasy. I watch a lot of fantasy. But, yeah, no, this doesn't do anything for me. There's no action. There's no songs. It's like, who does this... Like, you just watch the Horn Kings moments, but you know that deep down there's nothing impressive behind that.
So, out of curiosity, at any point in time, were you actually rooting for the Horn King to win in this movie?
Like, on principle. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I mean,
let's be honest. You've like straight up threatened like 3 of these characters' lives by the end of this podcast.
Yeah,
right?
I disagree with them on principle. I just don't like the heroes. It's not like there was some movie where I cheered for the bad guys, but I can't remember what it was. It's not important. So what are we doing next week, Cody?
Next week we're doing Avengers 4, right?
No, we're doing Avengers the 1998 one.
Okay.
Yeah. We're doing Avengers 1998. We're doing Avengers 1998 because that is a film that has been overshadowed by the Marvel films, and we feel it needs to get a little bit more attention. So see you guys next week. Hey kids, it's me, Editor Kyle. I differ from the Kyle you just watched in that I am from the future, and I am in possession of superior technology. Just a little few messages telling you where you can follow us on Twitter and whatnot. You can follow us on Twitter at Kyle and Cody's Cult Cinema Cast, at KC Cinema Pod, and you can find us on Facebook as Kyle and Cody's Cult Cinema Cast. Couple coming soon announcements. We do have a guest coming out in the next, not the next episode, but if not the episode after that, then fairly soon after that, if definitely happening sometime in April, probably early April. But speaking of the next episode, it is going to be a little late in the week. We just aren't going to have time to get it out on a Sunday, as been tradition so far. But we will be back to Sunday the following week. Now, on the episode where we won't have the guest, we'll be visiting the first episode relating to our sub-theme of Season 1, of Razzie winners that aren't that bad. I won't expose what we're watching that yet, but it is probably the most likely of these ones to have the fewest fans of the 5 I've picked. The Google Play app is coming. It just takes a little bit longer, and I signed up for it last. But keep your eye out. I'll make sure to post something on Twitter and Facebook when it comes out. Credit for the music goes to royaltyfreemusic.com, and credit for our brand new logo goes to friend of the cast, Victoria Koops.